Good morning, students. So yesterday I explained to you this problem number 12. Okay, as I said, there were some errors as per the questions and the answers that were given. Right, the question, as per the question, it asked for 10 customers, but in the program itself, it was not mentioned. Okay, so you can correct the programs. Okay, so today, yeah, question number 13 and question number 14. Okay, solve exercise from the solve exercise question number 13 and 14. This is from the following chapters, that is from the pointers. As you can see, that asterisk symbol which we have still not seen, so that is from the pointers chapter. Okay, so when we come to that chapter, I'll explain. You'll get an understanding about these two programs also. Okay, so I'll skip these two programs also. Okay, and then question number 15. Okay, question number 15 is also the first. Yeah, so these are some list of questions. Okay, based on that, some short answers also there. So some part is correct, some part there is also some typing mistakes. Okay, some printing mistakes are also there, so I'll skip this one also. Okay, so we'll come to the next, that is question number 16. Okay, so in question number 16, write the output of the following program. So here this program is given. Okay, so in exam also, these programs will also be given. So based on this, understanding this program, you have to get this output. Okay, so all you have to do is that you don't need to write down this program. You just need to understand how this program process is going, and then after that you need to give the output. So you just need to write down this output. So you might get 2 marks, you might get 4 marks also. Okay, so first thing is that you observe is that the class name the class is defined here. So the class, and under the class declaration, you have the class name as counter. Okay, so this is the name of the class, and then under the private access specifier, the data members, one data member has been declared, one variable, that is unsigned int count. Okay, so here you are seeing for the first time this we have been using this unsigned data type for the first time, right? So we under if you observe in class 11 under the data type, okay, chapter, this unsigned is also there, right? So unsigned can be used with character, with int, with float, like that. Okay, unsigned usually means that, okay, this integer, when we talk about integer data, if we say int count, it can accommodate, the variable can accommodate values starting from negative numbers to 0 to positive values. Okay, but when we write down unsigned int, okay, so unsigned means that the integer value that will be stored will only be of positive values. That means no negative values. So anything from 0, okay, to a positive number. So you cannot have any negative values stored in this variable count. Okay, so this is your data members. Okay, so under the public access specifier, okay, uh, three functions are defined. Okay, three functions are defined. When I say defined, in the sense that the body of the function is also written here, right? So the functions are not declared here, but the functions are defined here. Okay, so since in this case the functions are explicitly defined here, so here the first one is your uh, constructor. Okay, how do we know it's a constructor? Because uh, by the name counter, right? The class name is also counter, and the constructor name is always same like the class name. Okay, so how do we know this is a so what kind of a constructor it is? This is a default constructor. Why? Because uh, you see within the within the parenthesis, no parameters are declared, no arguments values are measured, right? So in this case, since no parameters are declared, okay, so this is a default constructor. Okay, so this default constructor initialize uh, the count variable to the value 0. Okay, now default constructor usually does not mean that it won't have a function body. It will have a function body, but the default value would be assigned to that particular variable. Okay, so in this case the variable count is assigned the value 0. Okay, now next you have your normal member function definition. Okay, so this is void, the return type is void increment count. Okay, so in short inc, increment count. So what it does within the function body, okay, within the function body of that uh, uh, within this member function body you have count plus plus, so which means count equals to count plus 1. Okay, so again int get count. So what it will do, it will return the count, it will return the count variable, so which means that it will return the value which is stored under the count variable. Okay, so that's why you have a return type called as int. Okay, so in the second one, in the second member function, you see that the return type is void because it does not return any value, right? But in the third case you can see that the data type is mentioned int get count. This function has a return type int. Why? Because it returns the value that is stored in this variable. And what type of variable is this? It is an integer value, integer variable, right, which returns an integer value. That's why int get count. Okay, now under the main function, okay, the class is declaring two objects, c1 and c2. Okay, now normally in your program, in the in the textual program, okay, you have seen that when you declare under the constructor overloading, when you declare two objects, two constructors were called. One was the default constructor, one was the parameterized constructor, like that, right? Okay, you can have only one default constructor, keep that in mind. Okay, you can have as much parameterized constructor provided the number of parameters differ. Okay, so what happens is that you have two objects declared, but you will see that this is a normal object declared, right, with no parentheses, with no parameters, with no implicit call or with no explicit call. So there is in this object declaration no with there is no bracket with any arguments passed, right? No values are passed by this object. So this is what a normal object declaration. So when you declare an object, what happens? The constructor gets called automatically, right? But in this case, since the constructor is defined explicitly, okay, so what happens is that upon creation of this object, first object, this constructor will be called, and this constructor will initialize the value uh, 0 to the variable count. Okay, you got it. So when this when this object c1 gets declared, okay, the default constructor will be called, and it will execute this function body. It will execute that function body, and then it will assign the value 0 to the variable count. Okay, so that will be displayed c out. Okay, c1 equals to, okay, so here you have the calling function c1 equals to, so what initial value has been stored will be displayed using this c1 dot get count. So when you say c1 dot get count, the object is accessing the value that was stored using this member function. Okay, so the object calls this member function get count. So this is your calling function. Okay, so the object calls this member function get count. Okay, and then it executes this function body within this curve bracket. So this is your call function. This calling function calls this call function. Okay, and then it executes this function body. So return count. Now what was the value that was stored in count? 0, right? So that value will be returned back, to the calling function, and then it will display c1 equals to what value? 0. Okay, so you get the output c1 equals to 0. Okay, again the next line statement, c out c2 equals to, okay, so c2 dot get count. So again the same function is being called again, okay, by a different object. Okay, so you can see that the function gets overloaded, right? The same function can be used by the two different objects, right? So the same function body gets executed by two different objects. So it is possible using the overloading method. Okay, so here this is the calling function. The calling function calls this call function and then executes this return count. Okay, so again what will happen? Count value is still 0, right? Count value is still initialized to 0. So what do you get? Cout c2 equals to 0. Okay, now after that the next one line statement c1 dot increment count. So now the object c1, okay, calls the next function, the next member function, that is increment count. So it calls this function void increment count, okay, and then executes this formula count equals to 0 plus 1. So you're getting the value. So what value will be stored under the object c1? So c1 data member count will store the value uh, 1. Okay, now keep in mind that the two objects are accessing the same member function. The two objects are accessing these data members. Okay, but this object data member and this c2 object data members memory locations are different. When this object is accessing this member function, okay, the memory location for this member function is allotted in only one place. So both the objects can access these member functions, but these two member functions, okay, repeatedly. However, when the object is storing the value in this data member, okay, and this object c2 is storing the value in this data member, the memory location for both the data members will be different because they are two different objects. Okay, so count value which is storing 1 for c1 object, okay, and c2 object will store the value of count in another different memory location. Okay, so when you execute the next line statement c2 dot increment count, okay, again this function will be called and then it will execute count equals to, what is the value of the count? 0, right? Count equals to 0 plus 1. Okay, so count equals to 0 plus 1. So 1 is stored under the count variable. Okay, now that 1 which is stored in count variable and this count 1 which is stored in the c1 object, the memory locations are different. Okay, so next again when the same function is being called again by the object c2 increment count, okay, what was the previous value stored in here by the object under the object c2? 1, right? Previously it was count equals to 0 plus 1 1, right? So now 1 was stored under count. So again when this function gets called again, what will happen is that count will be again count equals to 1 plus 1 2. Okay, so in under object c2 you're storing the data member count is storing the value 2, and under object c1 the data member count is storing the value 1. Okay, so when you execute the cout statement c1 equals to c1 dot get count, this function again gets called, okay, return count, so it will return the value 1. Okay, and in the next line statement c2 equals to c2 dot get count, okay, then in that case it will return the value 2. Okay, since you have two different objects, okay, the data members both the object data members will be in different memory locations. That's why you are getting two different output values, not 1 1, okay, but 1 and 2. Okay, so I hope you have understood this program. Okay, now in the next program, okay, uh, question number 17, define a class serial in C++ with the following specifications. So you have specifications that are like private members. So the name of the class is serial. Okay, so these are the private data members. So the data members are here serial code integer. Okay, so based on that here serial code has been declared of as integer type. Okay, title 20 characters. Okay, so title is 20 characters, so that means you have an array. Okay, array of 20 characters. So under textbook it is written here character title 25. Okay, so as per the question it is 20. Okay, so you can make that correction here 20. Okay, so how do we get the data type? Because title is of 20 characters, right? So from there you can understand that it will store character values. Okay, duration is float, so here as per the declaration float duration, and same case number of episode integer, so as per that integer declaration number of episode. So all of these are private data members. Okay. After that, public member functions of class. So all the member functions that are used in this particular program are all public. Okay, so in the first member functions is a constructor function to initialize duration as 30 and number of episode as 10. Okay, so here in the first case you have a constructor. Okay, a constructor function, keep in mind a constructor is a function, a special member function. Okay, to initialize, that means to assign the value to this variable, to this data member, the value 30. That means duration equals to 30 and number of episode as 10. That means number of episode equals to 10. So this constructor will assign the value 30 to duration and 10 to number of episode variable. Okay, so that means assigning, right? So assigning means what? In this constructor function body, within the curly brackets. Okay, so that means this function, this constructor function is not declaring any parameters. It is also not been assigned any arguments, right? It is not passing any arguments. That means inside to initialize, in this constructor function body you are assigning the value to these two data members, to these two variables, right? So what type of constructor is it? So this is a default constructor. Okay, because no parameters, as per the sentence, no parameters are declared. Okay, so that's why here if you see, okay, under the public access specifier the name of the constructor is here, which is the same name like the class name. Okay, so within the body duration equals to 30, number of episode equals to 10. So this default value is being assigned to these two variables using the default constructor. Okay, so you are explicitly declaring a default constructor here. Okay, so that means when this program runs, okay, this constructor will get invoked upon the creation of an object. Okay, so since you have a default constructor defined, okay, there is no so that means this will be the, when the object gets declared, this constructor will be called. Okay, so this is your default constructor. Next, new serial function to accept values for serial code and title. Okay, so this is a normal member function. Okay, so this function will accept the values for serial code. That means input the values. So serial code, what value you will store in serial code and what values you will store in title, right? So that means you're using your cout and c input, right? So here under that function body you have enter the serial code, serial c in serial code, because this is integer value, right? And under the enter the serial title using the gets function, right? Because you have character values to be stored under the title, so you cannot use the c in, but you have to use the gets function. Okay, next, other entries function to assign values of duration and number of episodes with the help of corresponding values passed as parameters to this function. So this is another member function. In this member function what you're doing is that you're assigning the values of duration and number of uh, episode. In the first constructor you're initializing, you're assigning the value 30 to duration and 10 to episode, right? But in here again you're assigning the values of duration and number of episode. So you're assigning a new value to the duration variable and episode as per the formula. Okay, with the help of corresponding values. That means with the help of corresponding values passed as parameters to this function. So in this function the parameters will be passed within this bracket. The parameters will be passed, which that parameters will hold the value which will be passed to these variables duration and number of episodes. Okay, so with the help of corresponding values, okay, see, pass as parameters. If pass as corresponding values, that means the values to this duration and episode pass as parameters, not as argument, right? Since it is passed as parameters, so that's why here you can see that void other entries in x int y. Int why? Because duration and number of episodes are of data types integer, right? So based on that, you have two variables declared, x and y. So these are the parameters. If it is mentioned pass as arguments, okay, so in this case it will be value, suppose like here 10, 20, like that, right? 10, 20. So that value should be passed to here and then assign, suppose like 10 equals to duration, 20 equals to number of episodes, right? But in this case, since the question says pass as parameters, so these parameters values, okay, these parameters are assigned to the uh, variable duration and number of episodes. So whatever value the main function sends, the calling function sends to the call function, okay, whatever argument values are passed here, that value will be transferred and assigned to the data members. Okay, we have seen these similar patterns in all the programs, previous programs, right? Okay, using the variables, using the formal arguments or formal parameters to assign the values to the data members. Okay, next is uh, display data function to display all the data members on the screen. So this function will simply display all the values that has been uh, entered. Okay, so it will display the serial code, it will display the title, okay, it will display the duration, it will display the number of episodes. Okay, so a very simple program. Okay, so try to understand this program also. Okay, now the next program, okay, is this also you can see that multiple classes are used, right? So this also we have not seen in this particular chapter, okay, because this implementation is in the next chapter, that is inheritance. Okay, so this also I explain once we finish the next chapter. Okay, so I hope that you have understood with these examples. Okay, so that will be for today. Okay, if you have any doubt, you can ask.